You attached yourself to something, a person, a role, a future. And for a while it felt like strength, like purpose, like the very thing that made you real. But then it shifted, or it left, or it simply changed, and you discovered something most men never admit until it's too late. You were not holding it. It was holding you. Your mood was chained to their approval. Your identity was welded to a title. Your peace was mortgaged against a future you never signed for. And when it broke, because it always breaks, you didn't just lose what you had, you lost yourself. This is not a video about silence. This is about what lives beneath it. The invisible architecture of attachment that turns strong men into prisoners, and the ancient Stoic art of walking away from everything that owns you. This is the Stoic Revenant. And today, we enter the art of detachment, not the coldness they warned you about, not the numbness they mistake it for, but the ancient discipline that separates what you hold from what holds you. Detachment is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of freedom. Stay. Listen. Let this settle. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be owned. No man does. It happened slowly, invisibly. A career you built your identity around. A relationship that became your emotional supply line. A status you began to need the way lungs need air. And each one felt like purpose, like dedication, like the very definition of a meaningful life. Until the day it trembled, and you trembled with it. And you realized you were not the man who held these things. You were the man these things held. This is the first and most dangerous attachment, the one you don't see. Because it disguised itself as commitment, as loyalty, as strength. Epictetus saw this clearly 2,000 years ago. It is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things. Read that again and feel its blade. Nothing outside you has the power to shatter you. Only the meaning you assigned to it, the identity you built upon it, the story you told yourself about what it proved. Remove the judgment, and the thing becomes what it always was, temporary, indifferent, and entirely powerless over the man who refuses to worship it. Consider the ice that forms across a lake in winter. It looks solid, permanent, a surface you could build upon. But it is not the lake. It is a frozen moment, a temporary state the water wears like a mask while the current continues underneath, indifferent and alive. You attached yourself to the ice, the title, the role, the certainty, and called it your life. But the lake was always moving beneath you, and when the thaw comes, as it always does, the man who built on ice falls, while the man who knew it was always water, simply swims. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, practiced poverty once a month. He dressed in coarse clothing, ate simple food, slept on the ground, not because he hated wealth, but because he refused to be owned by it. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days in which you shall be content with the scantiest fare, that you may learn that it suffices." This was not self-punishment. It was sovereign testing, proving to himself that the ice could break and the water would still flow. Choose one comfort you believe you need, not a luxury, but something you feel defines your day. Remove it for 24 hours, not to suffer, but to observe. Watch what rises in you, the anxiety, the irritation, the phantom ache. That is not need you are feeling. That is attachment showing you its face. Name it. See it. And understand that the moment you can remove a thing without your identity collapsing, you have taken your first step into real freedom. You poured everything into something. Months of effort, years of belief, the architecture of your hope arranged around a single result. And when it didn't arrive, something inside you didn't just disappoint, it collapsed. Because you didn't invest in the action, you invested in the outcome, and the outcome was never yours to guarantee. This is the second chain, the tyranny of results, the slow erosion of a man who ties his worth to what the world delivers rather than what he delivers to the world. Marcus Aurelius understood this while bearing the weight of an empire. Do what is necessary, and whatever the reason requires. The rest is beyond your control. Do not be diverted. Read that again, slowly. He does not say, do what is necessary and then hope. He says, do what is necessary and then release, because the result belongs to forces you did not commission and cannot command. And the man who needs the result to feel whole has already surrendered his power to the very forces he cannot control. Watch the wolf in winter. It does not hunt with certainty of the kill. It tracks with total focus, commits with full force, strikes with everything it has. And if the prey escapes, the wolf does not collapse in despair. It does not question its worth or spiral into the fog of self-judgment. It shakes the snow from its fur, reads the wind again, and moves forward. Because the wolf knows something most men have forgotten. The hunt was never about the kill. It was about the commitment to the hunt itself. Cato the Younger fought for the Roman Republic with everything he possessed: his voice, his fortune, his reputation. And when Caesar crossed the Rubicon, when the Republic fell, Cato did not shatter, because he had never attached his worth to the outcome. He fought because fighting was right, not because winning was guaranteed. And when he chose death over living under tyranny, even his enemies respected him. Because a man who can lose everything and still be himself, the outcome release. Before any significant effort, a conversation, a project, a decision, speak these words silently. I commit fully. I release the result. This is not resignation. It is the most powerful position a man can take. Because a man who has released the outcome acts with a freedom the attached man can never touch. He fights harder, speaks truer, and moves with a clarity that only comes when you no longer need the world to validate what you already know, that your effort was enough, regardless of what arrives. You built a life of comfort, not by accident, but by design. You earned every convenience, arranged every routine, insulated yourself from every sharp edge, and slowly, without noticing, the comfort became the cage. You stopped taking risks because risk threatened the comfort. You stopped growing because growth required the discomfort you had spent years eliminating. This is the third chain, the soft prison. The man who wraps himself in warmth and calls it peace, while underneath, something vital is atrophying, something that can only survive in the cold. Musonius Rufus, the most practical of the Stoics, spoke directly to this. We must endure what we cannot avoid, and we must practice hardship voluntarily so that we are not broken when it arrives uninvited. Notice, he does not say comfort is evil. He says untested comfort is a trap, because a man who has never chosen discomfort would be destroyed by it when it chooses him. And it will choose him. Loss will come, change will come, pain will come, and the man who built his life on the illusion of permanent ease will discover that his fortress was made of cotton. Consider the vine that climbs the oak. It wraps tighter and tighter, drawing its strength from the tree's height, never developing its own trunk. And when the oak falls, as every tree must fall, the vine collapses with it. Not because the vine was weak, but because it attached itself to something it was never meant to become. You are the vine, clinging to routine, pleasure, predictability, and the oak you're wrapped around will fall. The only question is whether you will have grown your own trunk before it does. Theodore Roosevelt understood this intimately. He was a sickly, asthmatic child, a boy the world had already written off, but he built himself through deliberate suffering, boxing, hiking, ranching, soldiering, not because he enjoyed pain, but because he refused to let comfort define his limits. He called it the strenuous life, and it produced a man who took a bullet mid-speech and finished the address. If this is resonating, if you're recognizing chains you didn't know you were wearing, subscribe and join the Revenants. We study the dark side of Stoic discipline here, the edge most philosophy channels won't walk. Once a week, deliberately choose the harder path. A cold shower, a skipped meal, a conversation you've been avoiding, a physical effort you've been deferring, not to punish yourself, but to remind your body and mind who gives the orders. Because the man who can choose discomfort is always freer than the man who flees from it. There is a particular kind of imprisonment that wears the mask of love. You gave someone your trust, your vulnerability, your presence, and slowly, without announcement, they became the axis your emotional world turned around. Their approval lifted you, their silence crushed you, their mood became your weather. And you told yourself this was devotion. This was what depth felt like. But devotion does not make you smaller. Devotion does not turn a man into a mirror reflecting someone else's needs. You were not loving, you were leaning. And the lean became a dependency the other person never asked to carry. And you no longer knew how to stand without. Epictetus drew this line with surgical precision. No man is free who is not master of himself. And mastery of self includes mastery of your emotional architecture. The moment another person's behavior determines your internal state, you have handed them the key to a fortress you were supposed to guard alone. This is not love. Love is giving someone access to your world. Dependency is giving them authority over it. And the Stoic does not confuse the two. Watch the eagle in flight. It rides the thermal, the rising column of warm air, lifting effortlessly, climbing with grace and power. But the eagle does not need the thermal to exist. It chose it. It used it. It was served by it. And when the thermal dies, as thermals always do, the eagle does not plummet. It finds another, or it creates its own lift with its own wings. Because the eagle was never attached to the wind was simply useful while it lasted. This is how the Stoic loves, fully, deeply, but without the silent contract that says, if you leave, I fall. Marcus Aurelius lived this test in the cruelest form. His most trusted general, Avidius Cassius, a man he had promoted, mentored, trusted, declared himself emperor and rebelled while Marcus lay ill. The betrayal was absolute, and the world expected rage, retaliation, collapse. But Marcus responded with measured action. He prepared his forces, addressed the Senate with calm, and when Cassius was killed by his own men, Marcus didn't celebrate. He grieved the loss of a man he had valued and showed mercy to the conspirators, because Marcus had never attached his identity to Cassius's loyalty. He valued it, but he was not owned by it. And when it broke, the fortress stood. Ask yourself honestly, if this person disappeared from my life tomorrow, who would I still be? If the answer is unclear, if it trembles, if it reaches for something to hold, that is not depth. That is dependency wearing devotion's face. And the work is not to love less. It is to stand first, and then love from that standing. You built a self, carefully, over years. The strong one, the provider, the man who handles it, the one they rely on, the one who never bends. And somewhere along the way, the self became the cage. Because now you cannot be vulnerable without feeling like a fraud. You cannot ask for help without a quiet crisis of identity. You cannot rest without the guilt of a man who has fused his worth with his function. And so you perform, not because you want to, but because you no longer know who exists when the performance stops. Marcus Aurelius wrote this to himself in the quiet of his tent. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This is not morbid. It is clarifying. Because when you remember that every role is temporary, every title is borrowed, every function will end, you stop worshipping the mask and start building the man beneath it. The Stoic does not reject identity. He refuses to be imprisoned by it. He wears his roles the way the body wears clothes, functionally, deliberately, and always with the knowledge that what wears the clothes is not the clothes. Observe the tree in winter, stripped of every leaf, bare to the bone, exposed to the wind and the frost and the indifferent sky. It looks like death to the eye that has never looked deeper. But beneath the bark, the roots are drawing life from the dark earth, storing power for a spring it cannot see but trusts with its very substance. The leaves were never the tree. They were its performance, its season, its costume. The tree was always the root, and the root was always alive. You are not your role. You are not your function. You are not what you produce. You are the root. And the root does not need applause to grow. Seneca was exiled to Corsica, stripped of his position, his wealth, his influence, the entire architecture of his public identity. And in that desolation, he did not collapse. He wrote some of his most powerful letters, found depth in isolation, and later wrote, "Wherever I go, there is my fortune, and my fortune is myself," because he had learned what most men never discover, that when the world removes every label, the man who knows his own root does not diminish. He distills. He becomes more purely himself than he ever was wearing his titles. Write down 3 things you believe define you: your role, your function, your identity. Then ask, with absolute honesty, which of these would still be true if everything external was removed? The one that remains is who you are. The others are what you do. And there is nothing wrong with doing, except when you confuse doing with being. Here is the final wall most men never climb. The fear that detachment means nothing, that releasing your chains means walking into a void, that if you stop needing, stop leaning, stop clinging, you will feel nothing, become nothing, mean nothing. This fear is the last trap, and it is the most sophisticated one because it wears the mask of depth. It whispers, your attachments prove you care. Without them, you are hollow. But the Stoics showed us the opposite, that the hollow man is not the one who lets go. The hollow man is the one who was never filled by anything but his chains. Epictetus named this precisely. He who is dissatisfied with what he has is not likely to be satisfied with what he would like to have. Read that a 3rd time. The dissatisfaction was never about what you lacked. It was about what you clung to. Because attachment turns every possession into a prison, every person into a lifeline, every identity into a sentence. And the man who keeps adding chains does not feel more alive. He feels more buried. Detachment is not the removal of life. It is the removal of what buries life. Consider the arrow at full draw. The string pulls it back, tension mounting, the whole structure of the bow engaged in holding it in place. And in that moment, the arrow is under maximum force, fully attached, fully loaded. But it is not flying. It is not free. It is not what it was made for. The release, that moment when the fingers open and the string snaps forward, that is not loss. That is liberation. The arrow was never meant to stay on the bow. And you were never meant to stay attached to what holds you back from what you could become. Identify one attachment you've been gripping too tightly. Not a person, but a need, an outcome, an identity, a comfort, a certainty. Name it on paper. Then burn the paper. Not because fire has magic, but because ceremony speaks to the part of your mind that runs on symbol, not logic. The attachment may not disappear instantly, but the act of release tells your deepest self. This no longer owns me. This is the freedom on the other side, not the absence of things, but the absence of their tyranny. You can still love, but you no longer need. You can still strive, but you no longer depend on the result. You can still be strong, but you no longer perform. You have become what the ancients called the sage, not a man who feels nothing, but a man who is owned by nothing. This is the Revenant's path, to rise not because you have everything, but because nothing has you. Detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. It is not emptiness, it is sovereignty. Every chain you release is a door you open. Every attachment you dissolve is a version of yourself you outgrow, and every moment you choose freedom over need is a declaration that you have become something the world cannot buy, cannot break, and cannot keep. Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, they did not conquer their world by holding on. They conquered it by letting go. Now, your turn. Drop in the comments. I am untouchable. No explanation. No context. Your detachment just became your throne. This is the Stoic Revenant. Go quietly. Go freely.